There may be as many as 9 billion other human beings on this planet, and periodically we interact with each other. Occasionally we connect, and at times we connect in very meaningful ways. In the 90s, special thanks to a mutual friend, I met a group of dudes who lived in the town next to mine. And while I was the outsider, these guys were very welcoming. Jägermeister helped. We became fast friends and we set out on adventures regularly. Bars, Metallica concerts, trips to Tijuana, girls, cruising the Esplanade, and Cal City.
This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine.
It did not take long to realize I would stay connected to this group forever. Meet Chappie and meet Weibel, two of my dearest friends with over 30 years of friendship in our wake. We have been to weddings, graduations, have had children. Well, they have children. I pull out. Hey, speaking of weddings, I'd like to point out that extraordinary amount of excitement in my man Weibel's face right there. I believe in this moment he is recovering from that very special wedding gift I dropped in the truck on our way over to the chapel. The three of us are retired law enforcement, enjoying our lives in 3 corners of the United States. Occasionally, we talk on the phone.
What's up? Yo, who's that? Yo, pick up the phone. Hello? What's that? What's up? Yo, where's Dookie? Yo, Dookie. Yo. What's up? What's that? Hold on. Hello?
And occasionally, we get together. In 2024, we made this trip to Leiper's Fork, Tennessee. It was during this trip I told my friends about this channel and that we would be recording everywhere we went. Okay, so that's kind of cool. They put me in a minivan. I don't know about that. I'm gonna go talk to somebody. All right, we straighten that out. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm more of a Chevy and Ford guy, but this could be fun. Complete with oh shit handle. What's up? Couple of them, huh? What do we got for you up there?
I know, I'm just staring there. Oh, I got the fruit!
Yeah, but you don't park it. I know, because my in-law has his motorhome inside there. Oh, we have a vehicle lift. His truck. I sent you the address to my house.
Okay.
In the group chat. But if you want to,
I think I got it.
if you want to go to the store,
Yeah.
but a couple exits before that, or a exit before that, there's an exit called.
I mean, we're not going to be able to keep up with you, or
No, I'm just in case.
just in case. Okay. Yeah.
There's a exit to the right, turn right.
Okay.
And then there's an area with a bunch of shops and stuff. You could Google it if we get separated, but there's a Kroger right in there.
Oh, perfect. Oh, okay. Well, that's easy. Yeah.
Because that little area. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, look at this. Sirloin.
What's
You've been waiting to.
What does it say at the top?
What is it?
No, at this top level.
I'm sorry. What does it say, sir? What does it say exactly? Turning a little rosy there, aren't you?
Got some fruit. Got some fruit. Oh, shit. Oh, I'm sweating, dude.
Sweating.
Just got a paper towel. Just got a paper towel. Beats by the time I get home.
Oh, I'm crying now. About 40 minutes south of Nashville, you'll find Leiper's Fork, or as the locals call it, the Fork.
We didn't see the warnings, didn't know a storm was coming. Do you remember hearing sirens that day? If something should happen and we get disconnected,
Oh, what's up, homie?
my only instructions, darling. Don't turn off the
Fun
stereo,
fact,
even if the
this is
lights
Justin
go out,
Timberlake's
the wind
home.
will blow, even if the ceiling tiles start to go. Honey, honey, don't turn off the stereo now. So grab a couple photos, just in case the house goes, to remind us that we looked so happy once. You just can't predict the weather. It doesn't matter who is better. And you don't know me, nothing makes sense. Don't turn off the stereo, even if the lights go out, the wind will blow, even if the ceiling tiles start to go. Honey, honey, don't turn off the stereo now. Don't turn off the stereo, even if the lights go out, the wind will blow, even if the ceiling tiles start to go. Honey, honey, don't turn off the stereo now. I think we're gonna be fine. We walked away with our lives, and we're always gonna have that night when you told me. Don't turn off the stereo, even if the lights go out, the wind will blow, even if the ceiling tiles start to go. Honey, honey, don't turn off the stereo now. Don't turn off the stereo, even if the lights go out, the wind will blow, even if the ceiling tiles start to go. Honey, honey, don't turn off the stereo now.
Your fucking Acme wash. I'm in there showering and I see fucking Acme wash. I'm like, okay, this is.
It's called making. So obviously, you're not using the sound.
No, we're gonna dub all the words out of this one. Or will we?
Should have had me out the window with a clear photo and a dirty windshield.
Nah, I just edit that out.
You can edit out the dirty windshield?
Yeah,
Come on.
You can put filters. I can even make your teeth white.
Oh, my plaque makes it white.
Yeah.
Nice.
At least you wore your Skechers.
No, another pair.
Not the light up ones, though.
Obviously not on like what's the Tuesday. Yeah, it's a little different, but if it's summer and whatnot, and weekends in the fall, they'll have like live music and
Summer. She here?
we throw the cornhole tournament out here, and you know, get a nice little party, and that's a quick place to hang out.
Well, I'm glad it's not busy. You get like a more personal tour.
Might even be just us.
Is this the entrance? Do you remember?
Is that?
Is this where you go? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's right here. Those are some of the other distilleries all over.
Oh yeah, Jack Daniels.
They were not too far from Pennington.
Remember Paddington Bear?
I don't know if the cat's alive. Giddy giddy.
Is that one work that's in your room?
Yeah.
You work here?
I do.
Oh, what is this place?
This is the Leiper's Fork Distillery.
Wow, this is awesome. And you work here?
I do. I do tours here.
Oh, you do? Can I go to work with you?
Absolutely.
All right, this way?
Yeah, come on.
All right.
Yeah, y'all feel free to take pictures at any point in time while we're in here. I'm also happy to grab some root photos that in here. Got one picture of the barrel wall. Of course, if anybody has any questions, don't be afraid to ask. So this is our still house. You look at the joints of the building, it's actually made in a mortise and tenon style. So there's no metal components, no bolts, nuts, or screws in those joints, just wooden joints and hand-pegged wooden dowels. So that's the first example of our pre-prohibition style. We're trying to honor as many of the traditional methods that would have been used prior to prohibition in our construction, all the way down to the structure of our building, the strongest natural joint in construction, very old school way to make it building. I've already mentioned one of our ties to prohibition outside. We went with a prohibition from 1920 until 1903. We're in the state of Tennessee. We started 10 years earlier, and we ended 4 years later. We had a much more robust prohibition. There were a lot of groups that were here against the consumption of alcohol. And we have one pictured on the wall over there. That is the Christian temperance movement of the early 1900s. Of course, we do not hold anything against these women. But we do think it's kind of a funny thing to put in the still house where you're making whiskey nowadays. Also, an important reminder of our history and the long journey it took to get to legalization here in 2015. When we did finally get that law in, the limitations that out there in place, 45,000 gallons of max volume that we distilleries in Williamson County can produce in a given year. So last year, we did that limitation. We made 470 barrels of whiskey. Just for some perspective, Jack Daniels, just down the road, we call them Big Brother. They can make over 175,000 gallons of whiskey every day. Every day, yeah. Look at what it looks like when that grain arrives here. They're going for the consistency of like coarse flour on that grain. So whiskey is a spirit distilled from grain. You take one of these grains, you ferment it to make alcohol, and then you distill that into a higher strength spirit, you're pretty much making whiskey. There's a bunch of different categories, different styles of whiskey that get made. 63 countries in the world make whiskey. 62 of those countries can use the barrels they age their whiskey in multiple times. Here in America, we're the only country in the world that has a category with a one-time use requirement. That's our native spirit. That's bourbon. It must go into a new oak container. That's the main rule that's going to make it distinct. It also must be majority corn, so at least 51% in that mash bill. We're using 70% down there. That's pretty common amongst bourbon producers. You get a lot of sweetness out of that grain. It's also what we grow here in America, so it's what we make our whiskey out of. Third main rule for bourbon, it must be made in America. A lot of people think you can only make bourbon in Kentucky. That is not the case. It's America's spirit. You can make it in all 50 states. It's currently being made in all 50 states, America. So that's the gist of bourbon, the general rules. All of those rules are also followed by Tennessee whiskey. So people ask me the difference all the time, Tennessee whiskey versus bourbon. A good way to look at it, Tennessee whiskey just copied and pasted all of the rules for bourbon right underneath it, but then it adds 2 more on top of that. Number 1, Tennessee whiskey has to be made in Tennessee. Number 2, that whiskey must go through sugar maple charcoal before it gets barreled. And it's called the Lincoln County process. It strips some of the oils out of the whiskey. It makes for a lighter body and a cleaner, crisper finish. That is where you get that smooth reputation from on Tennessee whiskey. But it's essentially just a bourbon made in Tennessee and charcoal filtered. The category for Tennessee whiskey only exists at our state level. It does not exist at a federal level. So whenever we get regulated by any sort of national entity and they talk about our Tennessee whiskey, they're going to call it bourbon because that's what it is to them, still qualifies as that. We also got the difference in our secondary grades here, 15% rye in our Tennessee whiskey, 15% wheat in our bourbon. Rye's a bit spicier, wheat's a bit sweeter, so we'll get to taste the difference in those in our tasting portion once we go back across. Or as time goes on. At the end of the 5 days, it's 8 to 10% alcohol. We call that distiller's beer. That's what you put directly into the still to make your whiskey out of. But if you go to a brewery, that's essentially where your alcohol production is going to stop. You're going to do some filtration and things like that. That's really where the production ends. That's how you make the beer. Now, you're going to have the opportunity to taste this. It's not going to taste like Coors Light. I can go ahead and warn you that. All right? We're using different grains. It's going to have different flavors, but it's essentially the same process. So, we have 1 batch fermented here in tank 1. Y'all would like to. You can go up this first set of stairs, take a peek inside. You're welcome to take a picture of it. Just do not drop your phone in there. You will not get it back for a few days. Now, this has already been going for a few days. I think it's on day 4. So if you want to dip in a finger and taste it, you're welcome to. But it is going to be a little more sour probably than you're expecting. Day 1, day 2 is when I really like to taste it because it's real sweet. But it will be interesting if you'd like to at least try it to see how these flavors will carry over into a whiskey that we'll try next. They're also in the process of pumping out tank 2. There's some finished mash that's already been fermented for 5 days. But we only have 500 gallons of capacity in our still. So they're going to pump this out half a tank at a time. So if you're looking at tank 2, you'll see it's still half full. You'll also be able to see the water-cooled lines that are running through it.
It's exactly like ATM.
I mean, I've never felt it in this cold, even on a winter day in here.
I don't want none of that. Bunch of drugs.
It's not at Skittles. I have a whole bunch.
Did you?
Yeah.
Where you got them in your pocket?
Yeah.
Where did the grains have a
It does taste like a light.
So wait till the aftertaste hits you, though.
One?
Distillation. So let's head back in front there and we'll talk about that.
Jack Daniels forwards, and those things are huge and they're all stainless steel. And then you can kind of catch a window and I walk past one before they come stick your head in there. So I did that and I saw it and there's so much carbon dioxide. It
Alright, so you might have heard me say in the beginning,
Like I was choking.
this is Ginger. You can tell we like her, we've named her affectionately. But she's a custom piece, 1 of 1, and she's another example of the pre-prohibition style. She's a Scottish copper swan neck pot still. That's her full moniker. They would have used copper back in the day because of its malleability. It's also a very good conductor of heat, and it will bind to some of the more unwanted components in your mash, sulfates. It'll end up making a better flavor on your whiskey. But our pot still here is kind of tedious. We put in that 500 gallons of mash. We're going to pump in steam from the boiler in the back through that silver tube into a double jacket on the bottom. That's how we're going to heat up that mash. As it heats up, our alcohol and our water is going to start to evaporate. That's our first distillation. As we evaporate off our liquid, we're going to be left with our spent mash inside. All the grain particles, they don't evaporate. That stuff you're picking out of your teeth if you tried the mash. So, still going to be left over inside the still. We're going to clean that out. It's going to be low alcohol, pretty high protein at that point. So we're actually going to give that to a local farmer, and he's going to feed that to his cattle. They love it. It's very nutritious for them. However, we have to distill our whiskey at least twice for it to be clean enough to go into our bottle. So once we get our first distillation here, our steam travels up the still, down the line arm, and then through our secondary still. That is a column still. They also call those continuous stills Because like the name implies, it works continuously. You feed that thing all day, every day, it will produce whiskey out the other side. That is how places like Jack Daniels are going to reach that 175,000 plus gallons every day. You're going to need like a 3-story version of one of them to produce that much volume. For us, it just acts as a secondary distillation. So we kind of have the best of both worlds. You get good flavor out of the copper pot still, but the expediency of getting a double distillation within one closed loop was our second distillation. Bourbon's going to be more robust. It's like a Jack coffee from bourbon to a Leiper's coffee. The oil's being present in the aging process when you grab more than 40 grams of Alright, y'all ready?
That's it, no Skittles for you. Bad cop, no donut.
Group in there, groups of 2s and groups of 3s.
Now you're going to get to learn how to smell and drink.
Only advice, sit in front of some whiskey. And welcome to our 200-year-old tasting room. So this cabin was originally built in 1820, and it was built by a man named James Daniel. So naturally, people would ask us all the time, is this man related to Jack Daniel? And we'd say no, there's a lot of Daniel families in Tennessee, right? Just a coincidence. But we were really just guessing, because a few months ago, one of his relatives brought in their family tree, and it turns out that James and Jack Daniel are actually third cousins on their grandfather's side. So we had been lying to people for 8 years about the real history of this cabin. That's kind of cool, right? This cabin is not original to our property. We had one like it, but ours is in disrepair. So we found this in Van Leer, Tennessee. We brought it piece by piece, 65 miles back over here, and then we hired a man to reconstruct it here using the tools that were available in 1820 to Mr. Daniel. So they did not use any power tools in that reconstruction. And we got featured on an episode of Barnwood Builders. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that show. But season 8, episode 9, if you want to go check it out. When we reconstructed this cabin, we made some modifications to it. Originally, it was a dog trot cabin, 2 pins and a trot, that's the style. So the hallway we entered wouldn't have had walls in the side. It would have had a roof on top, but it would have been an open air breezeway in the middle here. We like modern air conditioning, so we enclosed that dog trot. We also enclosed the front porch, however. And on that front porch, Mr. Daniel had carved his name, kind of like his address to his neighbors. So now it's on the interior of our building. And once we located that carving after we finished our construction, we realized we accidentally built this cabin backwards. Now, did anybody see that carving before we took off on tour? Unfortunately, it landed in the left-hand side bathroom, right over top of the toilet. We did not mean to do Mr. Daniel that way, so we have a nice little cover over that carving, but I'd recommend at least poke your head in the Daniel bathroom there on the left-hand side before you leave to see that 1800s carving. Let's get into our whiskey here. The one on your left should be the clear one. We call it Old Natchez Trace. So you may know of the Natchez Trace. It's that Native American hunting path and trading route that was used heavily by our settlers from Natchez, Mississippi, all the way up through the very property we're standing on. So that's why we're calling our white whiskey Old Natchez Trace to pay homage to it. But it's also what whiskey would have looked more like for the frontiersmen on the trace. It wouldn't have had time for barrel aging. Would have drunk white whiskey like this, probably at a lot higher proof and without the charcoal filter we've put this through. But it's going to be similar flavor here. Like I said, it's like a moonshine. We paid our taxes on it. Moonshine's typically going to be 100% corn. This is 70% corn, 22% rye, and 8% barley. So it's going to have a more well-rounded grain flavor profile, but you're not getting any barrel char on this. So that's a lot of what the focus is going to be. 45% alcohol, 90 proof. So feel free to pick it up. If you're an experienced whiskey drinker and confident, feel free to drink it as you like. I'm going to give a couple tips out, though. Especially with the white whiskey, you don't have as much flavor from the barrel to counteract the alcohol burn. So the alcohol is what you're going to be worried about. It's really the fumes that burn you, though. So when you smell your whiskey, I'd recommend leaving your mouth open a little bit. That's going to let those fumes cycle through your nose a bit better. It will not burn you as much. Same thing when you're drinking. I'd recommend exhaling immediately after you swallow. If you breathe in first, you breathe all those fumes into your lungs, it burns. You breathe out, it's not going to hurt as much. You get all the flavor across your tongue. So feel free. Take a sip. Let me know what you think.
Diesel fuel.
Now, this is familiar to anybody? Does it remind y'all of anything you've had before?
For sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get some good answers. Let them fly. First year of college, yeah. Like regret my ex. You know, can you compare it to another clear spirit, maybe?
Everclear.
Evergreen.
Yeah.
That's the one I hear a lot too. When I smell it, it smells a little bit like tequila to me. Obviously, you got to get past the burn and all that. But I know because me and tequila have our own issues, so we're very familiar with each other. But we make whiskey ritas out of this from time to time, Cinco de Mayo, things like that. And thus, I prefer this to tequila and margarita mix. It's a very good substitute for any clear spirit, but it's also a good experiment as a whiskey drinker, like I was saying, to know the background flavors of your whiskey. Everything but the barrel here. If you can pick out the corn sweetness, or the rice spice, or even some of the barley notes, you can carry that over into your aged products. You can get really good at dissecting flavors. So let's talk real quick though about the term proof. So I said this is 45%, it's 90 proof. So proof is twice the alcohol percentage. Does anybody know why that term exists? Like, why do we have two things that kind of describe the same idea, just a little differently? And they're on every single bottle. Well, we got to go back to the early 1500s. The Crown, Great Britain, they're good at taxing things. They're making some changes to their spirits industry. They're going to create a distinction between high strength and low strength spirits. The higher strength ones, they're going to pay more in taxes. But this is the 1500s. They could not test alcohol percentages yet. They hadn't figured out how to do it. So they had to come up with some kind of an objective standard to make the line between a high strength and a low strength category. So they come up with something called the spoon test. They take a spoon or a shallow container like a ladle, and they put some gunpowder in it. They then take your sample of whiskey, douse the gunpowder in that whiskey, strike a match, and try to light it on fire. If it ignites that gunpowder, then you have proof that you're a high-strength spirit. You are either a proof spirit because your spoon lit, or a non-proof spirit because it did not ignite. Now, what exactly this is proof of, how it works, why it works, they really did not know. I do like to imagine the guy that first came up with that test, you know, mixing alcohol and gunpowder, lighting it on fire. Like a few fingers later, he eventually figured out the right ratio. But the ratio was key. The idea behind this is that there's a certain threshold of flammability that's going to be required to ignite that spoon. The flammability is required by the alcohol content. They don't know exactly what percentage it needs to be, but if you keep the ratios the same, it's going to be a consistent test. They trust the spoon for a few hundred years before figuring out how to actually test percentages. And that's when they learned where that threshold was. It was 57% alcohol or higher. 56 or lower wasn't flammable enough. So when they learned that information, they made 57% alcohol 100 proof, which is kind of a hard conversion to do in your head. I can't do it. It's about 1.75 times your percentage to get to your proof point. Gets you pretty close there. Went on that way for a few decades doing that crazy math until we Americans got involved. We adopted the standard and applied our ingenuity or our laziness to it. Just set around that puppy up, multiply it by 2. We're going to make it easy on everybody. The British actually came around in the 90s, and they do it that way too now. So it's not like the metric system where we're still fighting them over it. We got this one. However, I think there is one country that does it better than all of us. That's France. They really just out-lazied us, but it's just 1-to-1 in France. They're like, why are we doing math on this? When we all know what alcohol content is anyway. But that's the history of proof. I'll see bottles every now and then. I've seen rum bottles that say gunpowder proof on them. They're 57% honoring that original test. Of course, it's 114 proof now under our modern standard, though. But all right, let's get into our second glass here. This is our Tennessee whiskey, but this is the aged version. So I set out there, this is 5 years old. Haven't gotten the new labels to reflect it, but it is 5. It's also 100 proof now, so it's a bit higher in proof. The mash bill is a little bit different too. It's 70 corn, 15 rye, 15 barley. But the big difference is going to be that barrel age you're probably used to getting on a whiskey. So feel free to pick it up, give it a nose, give it a taste. Try to save some though. I know it may be hard, but try to just get a first impression. We're going to add some water here after your first taste. Alright, so that's probably some more familiar flavors there, right? Can anybody describe what the difference was from glass 1 to glass 2?
I guess a little bit more than that.
It made it smoother, I mean, harsher.
Obviously, yeah, smooth.
Smoother.
Yeah.
But we're higher in proof, right? I agree with you. I think it is smoother, but it goes to show you there's a balance between alcohol content and flavor that kind of counter each other in a specific way. Smoothness is a bit of a subjective thing. We all have that specific balance. But yeah, like you're saying, this glass 2 to me is a lot smoother than glass 1. I would say out there, I like high strength whiskeys, like 130 proof, because you have the most flavor from the barrel you're going to get at barrel strength. The more water you add, yeah, the less alcohol there is, but also the less flavor there is to counteract it. So y'all got to find your sweet spot. Let's try to do that here. We all got little water droppers in front of us. I'm going to do a quick demonstration. I'm sure you guys know how to use these, but a while back, somebody did actually try to turn one over and milk it into their glass in here. So we've been doing demonstrations ever since. There's a lot of dairy farms nearby. We don't judge. But I would encourage you, just need like 2 to 3 drops. And I would encourage you to hold your glass up to the light and look through it as you add that water. You might can see it in mine, but you should be able to see a little swirl as your water interacts with your whiskey, like a little storm taking place. So they say add water to it because it opens up your whiskey. But what it's really doing is breaking down some chemical bonds that are created by the alcohol. It's called flavor chains. So they're going to bind some of the flavor in your whiskey where you can't taste everything at that 100 proof when you first had it. Now, when you've added water, you dissolve some of those bonds. You got new flavor that you couldn't taste the first time.
More drop. Oh. You start here, yes, it makes it more. Less harsh. And watered it down.
Now, I hear a lot of different answers as to how it changes.
Tastes better.
Let's start with the subjectivity of smoothness. So for some people, it's smoother. For some, it's harsher.
Yeah.
Did you taste harsh?
See, I heard both smooth or harsh.
This can't be, but like it tastes like harsh. Not as much.
It also depends on what part of your tongue you prefer to taste your whiskey on.
That's why you put ice in it.
For some people, it's sweeter. For some people, it's spicier. So whenever I try whiskey the first time, I'll try it neat. I'll add water like we did. Then I'll go back and add ice or a whiskey stone, something to chill it as well. Ice is going to melt and add water, so diluting it over time. But also, as you chill a whiskey, you're going to lose access to flavor the colder it gets. Now, the flavors that you can't taste at a lower temperature, maybe the ones you don't like. So therefore, you should put your whiskey on ice. There's no wrong way to drink whiskey. Sometimes I even pour some ginger ale in mine. That's my soda of choice. But it's the whiskey you like to drink, the way you like to drink it. Now, if you want to add Coca-Cola to your $1,000 Pappy Van Winkle, I'll let you do that. I'll enjoy it my way. But as long as you're enjoying the product, that's why we make the whiskey. Okay, let's talk real quick about bottled and bond. So you see it on my labels here. This is another set of rules, an extra set of rules on top of what already exists for our categories that we went over. And this is the 1800s, so they're not using commercial grade food coloring. They're soaking their white whiskey in rusty nails, or adding shoe polish, turpentine. Many are saloon owners, so what kind of a dark liquid is provided in little buckets by their patrons? They would dump spittoons in that white whiskey, yeah. This is the Wild West, so it can get pretty bad. Bad enough that the government decided it needed to step in. The problem is not with the rules for bourbon. The problem is that people just are lying about following them. So the government has to get some supervision and some quality control going on in the industry. That's what the Bottled and Bond Act is for. 6 rules. I'm going to talk about the first 3 real quick. Your whiskey has to be made at one distillery, under one master distiller, during one distilling season. So you don't want 2 different companies making one bottle. You want one guy in charge of how it's made. And all your grains have to be harvested within the same distillation season. There's 2 in a year. It's the first 6 months and the last 6 months. As between those seasons, the climate is going to change, and the flavors on your harvest are going to differ. So for quality control, you want all grains from one season. Also, all the barrels in your 10-barrel blend, they were filled in that same season. So it has a seasonal aspect to it. The other 3 rules, your whiskey has to be minimum 4 years old, has to be 100 proof, and it has to all be made in a federally bonded facility. So the age and the proof, pretty straightforward. The bonded facility is where we get our supervision. That still house back there, all of the whiskey you saw that's aging in those barrels, technically none of that belongs to us right now. As it sits, it is currently in the possession of our federal government. Because that's a bonded facility, they have all the rights to it. They can walk in there at any point in time, watch what we're doing, ask a question, they can take a sample, set up a cot, take a nap. They can do anything they want in that facility. It gives them the ability to say, we had our hand in the process, supervised it, and can put our stamp of approval on what that company has produced. So that's the idea behind Bottled and Bond. When it first came out, it was necessary for the market. Every single bottle needed to have it because you couldn't trust producers. Nowadays, we don't think Jim Beam's going to put some tobacco juice in our whiskey. So why do we still have Bottled and Bond? Well, it still creates a bit of a premium in the market with the age requirement and the proof requirement. Those don't exist at a regular level bottle of bourbon. So Bottled and Bond has a little extra there. It's also good for transparency. The company that's on the front of the label is the one that produced the whiskey inside of a Bottled and Bond bottle. Regular bottle doesn't have to be the case. If you look on the back, it may say produced by, but it may say bottled by. That's when a company will buy an already made product and just bottle it for themselves under their label. Nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of good ones. We're proud of the fact that we got our hand in every aspect of this production. So if you look at the back of our labels, it will say 100% mashed, fermented, distilled, and matured by Leiper's Fork Distillery. So another reason for Bottled and Bond, us being a craft distillery, you don't have to know who we are. When you know the rules for Bottled and Bond and you see our bottle, you know a lot about us. Any questions on that? All right, let's get into the last one here. This is our bourbon. So difference on this one from the first 2 is that it does not get charcoal filtered. So the first 2 Tennessee whiskeys had oils stripped out, made them smoother, right? Oils are present here in the aging process. So they're going to grab more flavor out of that barrel, make a more robust product, like a dark roast coffee here to a light roast coffee in your Tennessee whiskey. We also swapped out the rye from the secondary grain to wheat in this one. So it's going to have a bit of a sweeter undertone, still 5 years, still 100 proof, but also what I'm drinking. So I will raise a glass alongside y'all. I want to thank you all for coming out. Welcome you to our Leiper's Fork family. Cheers, everybody. And you're all experts now in your water experiment, so if you'd like to add some, feel free.
So, question. I don't know if you want to expand on that. A lot of times I've been on your tour and the guys talked about, like, I guess immediately after swallowing the product, like tapping your tongue against the roof of your mouth to also kind of enhance flavor.
To aerate, yeah. That's something that I do. Yeah, I actually do that when I have my water in my mouth too. That's kind of how I chew. Some people actually chew. I do the tongue slap. I also mentioned a bit earlier, another technique is the part of your tongue that you have the whiskey on. I usually don't prefer a whiskey that hits the back of my tongue a lot. And so if I'm drinking one that's heavy on that flavor, I don't like it regardless of what it is. So there is a bit of that where, there's some subjectivity to it. But I'd recommend just playing around with it in your mouth to see if you enjoy it that way. Both of those are 5-year aged?
Both of them are 5. So think about your favorites real quick, though. I want to tell you about the guy who owned the property originally. There's a rub of his headstone framed against the wall over there. His name is Colonel Henry Hunter. He's buried about 100 yards out of town. He's the original owner and the original distiller on this property. He was given the property in return for his service in the War of 1812. He fought in the Battle of New Orleans alongside Andrew Jackson, who's another Tennessee figure. And he was given a bunch of frontier land back in the day, which ended up being modern-day Leiper's Fork. So there's a hill in town, Moonshine Hill. That's where he was making white whiskey back in the day. He'd ship a lot of it down the Mississippi River, and it would end up getting drunk on Bourbon Street. So we got Bourbon Street, we got Bourbon County in Kentucky. Obviously, we call our whiskey Bourbon whiskey, but where does that name really come from? Okay, the Bourbon royal family, the French royals, they're helping us out in wars. We're naming cities and streets after them, so that's one of the influences. But they also use that term to mean premium. Bourbon coffee, bourbon sugar, those are like the best products in the market. So we're saying 2 things. Number 1, we really appreciate France for helping us out in all these wars. And number 2, we got the best whiskey in the world. So that's why we call it bourbon whiskey. Now over here, I've got a photocopy of a handwritten ledger from when Colonel Hunter sold 71 acres of his property back in 1836. Now, I don't know how familiar y'all are with our local real estate prices. You might have seen some of those beautiful homes on the drive-in. What do you think 71 acres went for back in 1836? Any guesses? If you can read cursive and you're quick, you can cheat. But does anybody want to guess? It's $200. And that was so much money back in that day, they split it up into 2 different payments. But the people that he sold it to, James and Ellis Peach, one of their descendants still lives on a piece of that peach property to this day. That's kind of how it goes around here in the Fork. There's a lot of, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th generation families. A lot of the locals that have been around for a while, they're called the town of Hillsboro. That is the original name. They changed it back in like 1801. So it just gives you an idea of how far back those memories truly go around here. Funny story as to why they had to change it. There was already a Hillsboro post office registered when they were trying to register their post office. So you want to get the Pony Express down to your little town, you're going to have to change the name. Leiper's Creek right here, Fork of the Creek is where the town is. We call it Leiper's Fork. That way we get mail. But yeah, if you see an old timer, looks like he's hiding his still somewhere, and you want to win some brownie points, name drop Hillsboro, and it might get you in. So what were the favorites here? We'll do a little poll. White whiskey. Anybody? White whiskey? Tennessee whiskey. Go. 1, 2. Okay. Everybody else is bourbon? A lot of bourbon fans. Okay. I will say Tennessee whiskey was my first love. That's the reason why I know this place exists. But when I came out here, I tried the bourbon the first time, and that is the reason why I work here. However, though, this past November, we did release that rye, and that is the reason why I can never quit my job now. So they do kind of keep one-upping each other. However, all of them now are like 7, 8 years old. Every time we tap a barrel, doesn't matter which one it is, it becomes my new favorite until we try the next. So we are coming up on the holiday season. Might be some special releases coming up. If you're interested in that, follow us on social media. We'll be doing blasts on that. Where can you buy us? We are in the gift shop, of course. White whiskey you can only get here. We don't sell it anywhere else. The aged ones we sell in liquor stores in Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, select stores in Colorado, California, Canada, and the United Kingdom. If you don't live in one of those places or you want to get our whiskey shipped to you, we can ship it to all but 12 states. I don't know them by heart, but they do have the naughty list in the gift shop. There is one more option. We're in the airport after security. So once you go through TSA, you can buy our bottle and bring it on your plane as a carry-on item. They do give it to you in like a sealed bag, though. You're not able to open it on the plane. But, what you do with your bottle is between you and the FAA. Once you leave these doors, I got no responsibility. Are there any questions for me before I let y'all out of here? Well, I appreciate y'all hanging out with me. Thank you very much. And welcome to the family, everybody.
Thank you. fucking back. We're back. Classic. We are back. We are back. We are getting Doug back.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have. We're the three best friends that anyone could have. We're the three best friends that anyone can have. And we'll never, ever, 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 ever leave each other. We're the best three friends that anybody could have.